Ready? Record, 1, 2, 3. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Those that are here in virtual spirit, and well, I guess those watching the replay would also be here in virtual spirit. So, hi, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm so excited to do this today. It was such an honor to connect with Savannah about this and to be able to create an open discussion around this. So I'm really excited. I'm really honored that you guys are here as well to take part in this. So I'm just going to do a little loving on Savannah, tell you a little bit about her, and then I'm going to let her take it away. For the most part, we're going to just have like an open forum discussion between her and I, like an interview style at first. And if at any point you guys have any questions about anything, feel free. You can drop it in the chat or unmute yourself too, just whatever feels best to you. And then we'll kind of have some designated time at the end to catch any other questions that might have come up. So Savannah is lovely. She's one of my oldest virtual BFFs. She's a nutrition expert and a wellness advocate. And kind of like she mentioned to you guys in the beginning, she's all about just helping people feel really well in their bodies. And she does this through lots of different ways, nutrition being one, lifestyle being one, and then also we figured dosing being one. So she's basically on a mission to help other ambitious women restore their energy, mental clarity, and hormones so that they can continue to reach their goals and still feel really good while doing it. And one thing that I know her and that I've really connected and loved about Savannah is that she also identifies with this recovering perfectionist ideal, which is the idea that we always have to be doing things perfectly and spot on all of the time, which means that we can feel kind of burnt out really quickly. So I know that, from what, the conversations that she and I have had before this already, that this is something that, dosing has really helped her with a lot. So this is something that I know I'm really excited to learn about from her in that way. I hope I did you justice there, Sav. Do you want to, if you want to add anything else, feel free.
No, that is pretty spot on. I've always really been interested in nutrition and body and health, but I got to it originally, and I think a lot of women do, is trying to live up to society's expectations, perfecting their bodies. And so I kind of made the transition into more of a holistic approach to health. And then my personal health completely collapsed from burnout, and I was in a really bad place with a lot of diagnoses. So I had to pull myself out of that. And as much as that was a really terrible, challenging time, it has been so incredibly valuable because now I can help other women with all of these issues. So that is me in a nutshell professionally.
I love it. Yeah. And then that kind of bridged, I guess, the first question is always like, oh, tell us about yourself, who you are and what you do. But it looks like we kind of knocked all that out in one go. So that was great. Look at us being effective, not perfectionists, but we're being effective. So, obviously we're here to talk about microdosing for our mental health. So maybe those of us that might be here, might be watching, can you maybe explain a little bit about what microdosing is for those who might be unfamiliar?
Yes, so a lot of people are familiar with what is called a trip dose or a heroic dose, which is where you go on an entire journey, you get all those psychedelic effects. Microdosing is a very small amount of the substance. So with psilocybin, that's 0.1 to 0.4 grams. And when it's at such a small dose, it's helping to heal the brain and the nervous system, but there's no noticeable psychoactive effects. So you don't feel like you're high or anything like that. And if you do feel anything, then you know that you've taken too much. Not that that is harmful in any way, but it can be counterproductive if you're someone who is dosing on weekdays, because we'll get into this a little bit later, but microdosing can really help with our work. But when we tip over and we've taken a little bit too much, it can make us a little more intellectual than is appropriate for what we're trying to do. Or we can just be like, the first time that I microdosed, I took a little too much. And I was like, that light is so beautiful. And I was like, okay, need to zone in and focus. So adjusting the dose is really helpful. You might find if you're dosing, you might be a little too high or you might be a little too low. So there's a little trial and error there. But basically, microdosing is a very small amount. And you shouldn't feel high in any way.
Mm-hmm. Is there like a preferred format, I guess, because I know there are teas, there are, edibles, things like that?
Yes. So when it comes to how to dose, There's different methods of how often to do it and the form to do it in. So like I said, it's that 0.1 to zero point 0.4. For me, sweet spot is 0.2 grams. I have talked with various people, and 0.2 seems to be a good place, but I also know people that do better at 0.5 or 0.6. So it really depends on your body, also what you are going through. So I think we can need more or less depending on what the situation is. In terms of how, it would be either in whole form or ground. The most ideal is ground, because when you grind it in the caps and in the stems, there is different amounts of psilocybin. So psilocybin is the active compound. There's a lot of compounds in it. That's the main compound. And so the concentration in caps and stems are different. So theoretically, if you had some psilocybin, you would want to grind it so that the powder is all the same. So that when you start to microdose and you're trying to find the amount that feels good in your body, you can adjust it because the amount that you have ground has all the same amount of psilocybin. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people can do it in chocolates. I know people that have put it in smoothies. It can be put into whatever drink that you want. Another way to do it is do the whole form of the mushroom without grinding it and measuring that out. But if you do that, that's not as ideal because, like I said, there's differences in the caps and the stems. So even if you get the same amount of grams, it's going to be different from dose to dose because you're using different mushrooms and it is a plant medicine. It's natural. It's not going to be perfect and consistent. The best times to take it is in the morning or the afternoon because it is a stimulant. So if it's taken in the evening, it can make people stay up because their brains are more active, and they can have their minds kind of thinking of all of these different things. So avoiding it in the evenings, taking it in the mornings or afternoon. Personally, I really like to take it during my morning practice. So I drink water in the morning, I have some chai tea, and that's when I will take a dose right before I do yoga. You don't have to pair it with a morning routine, but there is a belief that if you stack it with other wellness practices, it'll enhance the benefits. It also tends to prolong whatever the emotions are that are coming up from the wellness practices. So I feel that that positivity continues longer if I dose before I do my yoga practice. And then how, with or without food? So a common question is it going to make me feel sick? And microdosing, since it's such a small amount, usually doesn't make people's stomachs get upset. I know people that are really, really sensitive to larger doses, but can microdose just fine. If someone doesn't feel good, though, they can do like a ginger tea or a ginger juice. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so then there's also knowing the frequency. So there's a couple of different methods of frequency. The most common is every 3 days. So you dose on day 1, you take day 2, 3 off, and then you dose on day 4, and that starts over. The other common one is 5 days of dosing, 2 days off. Now, those are the two most common therapeutic schedules. And the reason you want to take breaks is because you can build a tolerance. And it's very likely that you'll build a tolerance, so you want to take those breaks. People also find that on day 2, that can actually be even more beneficial than the day 1, the actual dose day. So it has benefits on the days that you're not doing it. When people have done a scheduled dosing, usually after some time, they'll switch to an as-need basis and just take it when they feel like they need it, or on days that have demanding work. So we'll talk about workflow in just a little bit after dosing. The other common question is how long to do dosing. Now, this really depends on the person, where you're coming from, how much trauma or anxiety needs to be healed. And there isn't really, I haven't heard of like, oh, this is the set amount of time to do it, since it's so different. But on average, it seems that people benefit between 6 weeks and 3 months. And again, I think that can depend on how much is being dosed. I find that a lot of people find they can get off of their medications as quickly as 6 weeks. So it can be super powerful, and just checking in with your body and seeing, do I need to continue this? Do I need the plant medicine a little bit longer, or is it a time to ease back a little bit? So a lot of this is intuitive. And there isn't as much information on microdosing as there is on large doses, because that's not where the clinical trials are currently. So a lot of this is anecdotal. Anecdotal. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
The last thing about dosing, so we talked about how much to dose, how frequently to dose, when to dose. The last thing about dosing is there is something called stacking. So stacking is when you pair it with other substances that will enhance the benefits. The one that I like to stack it with is lion's mane. Are you guys familiar with lion's mane? Yeah, lion's mane mushroom. Okay. Lion's mane mushroom is a mushroom that is really good for cognition and memory. And it works with psilocybin because it increases the nerve growth factor in the brain along with it. So it has a lot more benefit on the brain when you put the two together. There's other stacking, like with things like niacin, which is a B vitamin. I have no personal experience with that, but that apparently is a thing that people like to do. But personally, I do a stacking with lion's mane and psilocybin. So that is it on dosing.
Yeah, that sounds great. I never would have thought to, put it, I think, with something else, because I don't know, I would usually in the mindset, and too, like you said, I most only have experience with like heroic dose. I like that word, like heroic heroic dosing. It makes me feel very valiant in a way, just for tripping. But you always think that, well, if I'm taking this one, then I should just let my body just deal with that one thing, and not like overwhelm it. But I like the idea of, since you are taking so little, then you can
Yeah.
kind of like boost yourself up in other ways too, like the cognitive addition that you said, which I really like. So I guess then we can bridge into then, so what does then, maybe those of us who maybe like me only have experience with the heroic doses, what that, hold on, Jules, will you
Yeah.
repeat the frequency? Like how often?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the most common schedule is every 3 days. So dose on day 1, 2 days off.
Okay.
Dose, 2 days off. So you can do that for a period of time. Or the other common way is 5 days of dosing, 2 days off. And then after doing that for quite some time, and you start to feel like you killed, like, whatever you're really trying to work on, it can be then used on an as need basis.
Cool. So then, yeah, in that sense, those of us maybe that too only have experience with larger doses, and if we say, okay, we're not really supposed to feel anything, well, what what are we looking to feel? What are some of the benefits, I guess, or what does then it feel
Yes.
like if you're not supposed to feel anything?
Okay, so we'll dive into the benefits, starting with mental health. So psilocybin with microdosing or with heroic doses, there's a difference though between doing the heroic dose and the micro, because with heroic doses, if you know what you're doing, you're coming with an intention, you have a lot of support, that can be really powerful, but we don't want to just like go into it not really knowing what we're doing, because you're basically like turning you into clay and you're able to remold yourself. But are you remolding yourself in a positive, in the right way? So some people who don't know what they're doing and they have a lot of trauma can find, whoa, I go way too deep, and a lot of things come up and then you don't know what you're doing with them. So when they do therapeutic settings, people do doses and then they have therapy sessions to integrate what came up and how to navigate that. The beautiful thing about microdosing is there isn't the same amount of concern of things maybe going a wrong direction, because you aren't getting that psychedelic effect, and it's just a very gentle, slower healing. So PTSD, depression, OCD, and anxiety have benefited so greatly from microdosing. A lot of people can get off of their antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, and to my knowledge, it is safe to take it with antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. I've been told this by a doctor, and as well as seeing that online. There will be a link for you guys that has a list of medications and supplements that people have taken without effects with psilocybin to reference. Okay, so the other potential is with things like eating disorders, and also healing brain injuries. There's more information that needs to come out about that. There's a lot of science happening. There's so much that we don't know still, and there's so many studies currently happening, but that seems really promising. And again, I am not an expert, but I will share what I know about how it affects the brain. So it changes or alters how the brain processes fear, which is why it can be so helpful for mental health. It also helps with the brain with neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to change and adapt to our environment and our experiences. And neuroplasticity is great, but can also be harmful. Anxiety is a example of negative neuroplasticity. So when we experience anxiety, the brain basically starts to learn, oh, hey, in these situations, we respond with anxiety. And so it starts to go on autopilot and responds more quickly to things with anxiety because it wants to save energy. Whenever the brain can auto things and save energy, it can be allocated to other things. So that's why we can find that anxiety gets worse and worse and worse, because the brain is basically getting better at anxiety. So that's negative neuroplasticity. But then there's positive neuroplasticity, which is changing the brain in the positive way. And that's something that psilocybin does. Another example of positive neuroplasticity is meditation. So that's rewiring the brain in a positive way, allows the brain to adapt in a positive way. It also can cause neurogenesis in the brain, and this is the ability to create new neurons and connections between neurons. And this specifically happens in the part of the brain that is super important for memory, which is the hippocampus. And so a lot of people with long-term stress issues will have issues with memory because cortisol, or stress hormone, eats away at the hippocampus. And so psilocybin can really help with that. Everyone, is this following? I know this is getting a little bit technical. Okay, and so those are some of the main things about how psilocybin affects the brain and why we start to have positive effects. We will start to be able to be less reactive to anxiety and stressors. But even for people that don't have any issues with mental health can greatly benefit from microdosing because it just increases overall happiness. It increases empathy and compassion. So there's this idea that microdosing just makes for better humans. People also find that because they're feeling more grounded, they're feeling less stressed, they're less likely to use other substances. So people report having less alcohol, less cigarettes, less cannabis, because it basically has the potential to do what those things are giving us, but in a healthier way. And then people can also tend to make healthier choices in their life and with diet because they feel better. They're not trying to soothe with other things. So those are the benefits for mental health. And in terms of what you should feel, it's different for everybody, but a lot of people just feel a sense of more happiness and less anxiety and less reactiveness. But apart from mental health, it also has a tremendous ability to help with creativity and workflow and productivity. So psilocybin has become really popular from everyone from spiritual people to Silicon Valley because of the ability to help with workflow. And it enhances our ability to do problem solving. And for me personally, it has allowed me to have a lot better work because I'm not over analyzing things. I'm not overthinking things, which can cause us to be more paralyzed and have a lot of resistance in our work. So when we're feeling more fluid, we feel confident in what we're doing, we can problem solve, we can make a lot more progress with our work. It also is reported by so many people, both what I've read and also from experiences, to help with focus. So it has also been used for things like ADHD. So like a natural side effect Adderall, almost in a slight way, but that starts to sound a little negative. But it helps with increasing productivity a lot. And personally, when I feel, so I've been microdosing for, I think, 10 weeks now, and I feel a lot of benefits with my mental health. But once I feel like that's good, that's resolved, I will continue to microdose intermittently on an as-need basis for my workflow. So a lot of people will line up their dose days with the days that they have the most, that are most creatively demanding, so that they can really move through all of that. Something I also wanted to mention was psilocybin doesn't give us anything that doesn't exist. So it's not like, oh, it's going to make you like this creative person and increase all of your productivity. It's just unlocking it or prolonging what is already inside of you, which I think is like a really magical thing.
Yeah, I
Those
love
are
that. That's very very like yogic in a way. You know, this idea that, oh, it's not giving you anything else that's not already inside of you, you know, it's just kind of unlocks that door, you know, and gives you that chance to connect to that. So I really love that. That was really beautiful. So I guess then too, yeah, you bridged in really well then. So now we kind of are somewhat well versed in how stress affects the brain and how psilocybin affects the brain. So can you tell us a little bit more, I guess, about your personal experience with it? You know, how has this 10 weeks been for you?
Yes, my leg is going numb. So I actually found benefits by the second dose. Again, the first dose I took a little too much, so that's why I'm not saying I found benefits from the first dose. Some people find that they need to take it for longer, but I started to see the benefits right away. My initial plan was to dose less frequently, but I was like, well, this feels really good for my body, and so I started to do it as a 5 days on, 2 days off. So my anxiety dramatically decreased. I was someone who was always naturally anxious as a type A perfectionist. I'm also a Virgo. And so I was always leaning towards a tendency of anxiety, but not recently, but in the last few years had gone through a lot of trauma and a lot of stress. And that had just made the anxiety basically unbearable and really hard to make any progress in my life. And the psilocybin really helped with the anxiety, and it also helped unlock all of the things that I was doing already to try to help my anxiety. So things like meditation and yoga and breath work, I started to feel really frustrated because I was like, okay, well, these things are working. I definitely feel better, but there's definitely room to feel a lot better. And once I started microdosing, it felt like it made all of that help my body a lot more. So as much as psilocybin can help people, even if they don't do any other wellness thing for their life. I know plenty of men who do it but aren't like as in tune with their bodies, and they're just like, I'm just taking psilocybin because it's going to help, which is great. It's beautiful because it can help you without changing your lifestyle, changing your diet. But if you also do these wellness practices in addition, it will help with a lot more healing along the way, because psilocybin doesn't heal your problems. Right. So if you find that you're less reactive to things, but you still have unresolved trauma, or you have things in your life that you need to deal with, it's not going to solve those, and those should still be dealt with. So I really like approaching both of those. I'm sorry the sun is doing this thing right now. So that is my experience with anxiety. And then with workflow, it's just allowed me to prolong the amount of time that I'm in a workflow, so I can work for a lot more hours and just feel in it. And like I said before, it's allowed me to not overthink and get paralyzed by my work, because that was such a problem for me when I had gone through all this trauma, and like my brain was just going all the time. So that is my experience with microdosing for the most part. Yeah.
I love it. And it seems so counterproductive almost that you say that people plan out and that even you personally felt more productive in a sense, you know, on the days that you would do this, where I think what a majority of people would think, you know, is on the surface, you know, well, you're on drugs, so you're not going to get anything done. So why would you be more apt to take more on the days where you needed to get more done? You know, so I like
Yeah.
the counterintuitiveness of that. I think it's
Yeah. And I think that um, that can help a lot of people with their resistance to doing microdosing, because there's this fear of like, it's a drug. And I know we're gonna get more into like, how can we ease the anxiety of trying microdosing. But one of the things is viewing it as a plant medicine and not as a drug, because personally, I don't see it as a drug. Drugs are made by man in a manufacturing plant or a chemistry lab or whatever it is. Mushrooms, cannabis, they grow from the earth. And so I'm a lot more open to those things. And if you also think of mushrooms in general, most medicinal mushrooms, they're adaptogenic and really healing to the body. I personally don't see psilocybin as any different. So yeah, I think that it can really support us in so many different ways.
snap, sister. Hell yeah. I was curious then too, and I mean, since you brought it up, because it seems like a lot of the benefits are somewhat similar, on par with reasons why I've heard other people use cannabis in that sense as well. And I mean, I know I've utilized it myself in that way too, that it kind of gets me like in a zone in a sense, you know. So I don't know if you know personally or professionally any of the differences of how the two kind of react in the body or in the brain at all. And I know obviously they're different strains of everything, but I don't know, do you have any insight on that at all?
I personally don't know how cannabis works on the cannabinoid system and how all of that happens. But it doesn't it doesn't seem that cannabis is as healing in terms of the brain and focus and all of those things. I think it's definitely really beautiful for relaxing and calming the nervous system, helping people sleep, helping people with pain, but they seem to have kind of different directions in their healing properties. But I'm sure there's some overlap too. Personally, I'm not somebody that can do cannabis and work. I've never been that type of person. Like if I have cannabis, like that is the whole situation of what it is. I'm not doing it for like work. It is a like chill situation. So I'm not somebody who's just coming to like, hey, microdose, it's great. Like, and I just, try all of these things and I'm all, into whatever. I'm definitely like a type A, like I want to be focused, I want to do my stuff, and microdosing fits really well into that. Again, why like Silicon Valley is also all over it. So that is that. Yeah. Next.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
next?
What's next? Yeah, I did. I wanted to give you a few questions that we got beforehand. One of them was, how do you incorporate microdosing with larger dosing if you do that sort of thing? Is a question we got before.
I have not seen any research on how to combine the two. And this again is me just talking from what makes sense to me. But I know that psilocybin, when you do a heroic dose, there's more long-lasting effects. So I think that it would be wise to take a period of time off between the large dose and when microdosing is resumed. I would probably in my head be like, okay, well, I'm going to take 2 weeks. But I think that it's really about the person being intuitive and checking in with their body. Maybe in a week, you're like, hey, I think I would really benefit from resuming the microdosing. Or maybe you're like, hey, I'm still good. I don't need anything. Maybe in 3 weeks, I want to do it. So I think it's really intuitive and depends on the person. But again, I haven't seen research that really says like, hey, this is what you should do.
Right. Yeah, no, there's not a whole lot of people talking exactly about it, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that's why it's so awesome that
But
we're
that's
all
why we're
here.
here.
Yay, thanks, ladies. And then the other question we got, which we kind of already covered a little bit of, is how important it is to take breaks, which we talked about, either the 3-day or the 5-day system. Tracking your progress is something that people are asking about, and reflecting on the benefits. So I guess any tips on how to track progress? And I guess progress is a bit subjective, but I don't know. Do you have any experience with reflection or tracking any of this?
So I think it depends on how analytical you want to be about it. We're going to go from like most analytical to less. You could track how much you're dosing every single time you dose and the days in between, and rate how are you feeling with your mental clarity, how are you feeling with focus, how are you feeling with your energy, how are you feeling with your mood, and giving yourself a scale and maybe writing a paragraph of how you're feeling. You'll probably start to see patterns between like what days feel the best. Maybe it's the day you dose, maybe it's day 2, or maybe it's day 3. So that is kind of a like, you're someone who's really on top of it and wants to really know what's going on. You could also do it once a week and just give yourself a check-in, so like, hey, I feel like I'm improving in these ways. I think this thing isn't really changing yet. So you can kind of gauge like, hey, I probably still need this plant medicine, or hey, it's time to ease off. As I said, am a Virgo. I am very type A analytical. And so part of my personal like healing and medicine is to back off of that and not get really analytical about it. So I personally have not been writing down, what's going on, how I am feeling every single day or every week, but I'm also someone who is super, super intuitive. And I'm just constantly doing that every single of the day, multiple times a day in my own mind, checking in, how's my energy, how's my mood, how do I feel, what do I need right now? So I personally don't track. So I think it's really, what is your medicine? What do you need for you specifically?
Aw, your Pisces moon is showing.
I'm trying to lean into it and push back on the Virgo. Virgo made me burn out. I'm like, hey, Virgo, chill.
It's okay. You got a good balance going on.
And that's the side too. I think that there can be some fear of like, how much am I doing? Am I doing it the right amount? Am I doing it the right days? Like, I just need to like make sure this is all perfect. And not that this is the ideal way to do it at all, but I have had periods of time where I'm super fluid about it, where I don't measure the amount of grams. I've like had a mushroom known like, hey, this is roughly 0.2 grams. This is what feels good in my body. I'm taking it like that. So that's not saying I recommend that at all, because the best way to do it is grind it. But this is just to hopefully ease some anxiety of thinking you have to do it perfectly, because I found a lot of benefit with while being imperfect. And like, again, that's my practice, is I'm trying to be imperfect.
Good. Well, no, I mean that's something I think that a lot of us resonate with, and that we all struggle with as well. Um, I guess we can piggyback off that then. And so then, what would you say maybe to someone who's interested in trying it but might be, a little bit scared? Maybe they've never taken any sort of dose at all, and they have no idea what to expect.
Yes. The first thing I want to say is, personally, with psilocybin, I was very, very nervous because I can have a tendency to get anxious. And I found with psilocybin at a heroic dose that I was a lot more in control than I thought I would be, and didn't find it scary, but that was my personal experience. So I was able to get over that really quickly. Once I had it, I was like, well, this is a plant medicine that feels good in my body. But apart from my experience with that, psilocybin, again, is a plant medicine. It's not a drug, in my opinion, and it's not a medication, whereas medications have a lot of side effects. And so for me, I'm like, well, all of these people are really open to taking antidepressants and anxiety medications, but you're numbing your feelings. There's a lot of side effects. And people have a hard time getting off of them. And so microdosing with psilocybin gives all of these benefits without being addictive and without causing side effects. So to me, I'm like, well, it makes so much sense. Another thing, getting more like, hey, this is going to back up the feeling so you feel better, is there is so many universities that are doing clinical trials on it, from Harvard and Stanford and Hopkins and Yale. And the reason they're doing this is because the FDA has approved that these are good for clinical studies, because number one, it meets certain criteria. Number one is that there is a low risk for causing any negative effects. So that is huge. And number two is it has a great potential for addressing a critical medical need that is not being addressed to the best of the abilities with conventional medicine. So it's not just, these spiritual people being like, hey, take this plant medicine. There is a lot of research going into it because it has so much potential, and because it's showing to have not negative side effects. Also, if people are worried about the idea that maybe there could be a bad trip, again, at the small microdose, that's not the risk. And lastly, if you start microdosing and it doesn't feel good in your body, you don't have to keep doing it. So, we're not trapped. If it doesn't feel good and it's not the medicine for you, that's fine. You tried it, you move on. So I think that for your first dose, maybe do it on, and again, I don't know, we didn't really go into this, but this is all educational and I'm not recommending anything. So when I say you, it's theoretical. But if you were to try microdose, I think it'd be best to start on a weekend, just to be sure. And then once you have those, you might work days.
Yeah, I like that. That's good fail safe. And I guess, yeah, thank you. I guess now is a good time to read this. Neither the local mystic nor Savannah Bleue condone nor encourage the use of illegal drugs. This is an open discussion and forum for sharing personal experiences and emotional connections. This is for informational purposes only. Yeah, I don't think you guys are going to sue us, but just so you know, that's out there.
That's fair.
Do whatever you guys want.
The last thing I want to say is I think that a lot of people have resistance. Maybe this is a different audience, but I think a lot of people can have resistance because of the stigma, because it's been classified as a class 1 drug. And people that are okay with having alcohol, like, that can cause a lot of damage in the body. Psilocybin hasn't been shown to have biological negative effects. So to me, it's I've had to, with a lot of things in life, to shed the pressures of society about how you should live, what you should do with your body, and just be like, that's other people's noise. And just like how cannabis has become a lot more accepted because now it's legal, now we feel better because the world says that it's legal, but it's still the same medicine that was the entire time. It's not going to be that long until psilocybin is also an accepted, medical use therapy. But I personally decided I'm not going to wait for the rest of the world to get on board before I benefit from it. So that is my view about, hopefully that's encouraging of why it's not so scary.
No, it is. And I think now I want to make a shirt that says, I forget what exactly did you say? It's like, that's other people's noise. It's like, don't worry about it. That's other people's noise. It's not mine. I'm going to put
Literally
that
the
on a
motto of
t-shirt.
that, like my key recommendation for recovering from burnout is you got to quiet the noise. I would like to talk about who shouldn't microdose potentially. So it's not very clear, but there is potential risk with people that have color blindness. So that would be recommended not to, because it can cause visual issues that are longer. People with psychiatric disorders with any psychedelics, that can be an issue. And then those on the autism spectrum. And with the autism spectrum, from what I know, it's because you have to take a lot larger of a dose to have the benefits, and then it's at a microdose, and it's just a different thing. I also want to say that there is a small percentage of people who find that it increases their anxiety. It's very small, but it's possible. If that happens, it's okay. And then that's just not the medicine for you. But I just want to like have awareness that if it doesn't feel right in your body, then maybe it's not right for your body. But first thing to look at if there is an increase in anxiety is, number one, sometimes we have an increase in anxiety because it's just a new thing. And we're like, what do I feel? What's going on? Two, it could be that the dose is too high. It needs to be lowered a little bit. So kind of a little bit of a trial and error, find your sweet spot. If you continue to not be able to find a sweet spot, maybe it's not the medicine for you. Like I said, we're going to be sharing, I don't know how you're going to be sharing it, but there is a link about supplements and other drugs that people have taken with psilocybin without negative effects. Again, this is anecdotal reports because microdosing doesn't have like as much clinical studies behind it. But it comes from a reputable source.
Yeah, here, I'm pulling up all of your links now, and then I'm going to drop them in the chat, and then also the replay that's going to be in the members club portal. It'll have all the links in there too, which would bring us to our last little bit, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions, which is, I'm going to take a stab in the dark and assume that most of us do not have psilocybin resting in our kitchen cabinets at the moment. So do you have any other like just diet and lifestyle tips that might also help improve mental and brain health?
Yes, yes. And I love talking about this. The first thing with any imbalance in the body, it doesn't matter what it is. I have clients that are coming to me with fibromyalgia, with PCOS, with infertility, with whatever. We start with transitioning to more whole foods diet. So when we take out the processed foods, the inflammatory foods, the body is going to be able to heal better. And by eating abundance of whole foods, then our body is getting all of the nutrients it needs that are building blocks for all of the amazing things that it does throughout the entire day. That aside, that's like the basic groundwork. Balancing blood sugar is super, super, super key for mental health. That imbalanced blood sugar is a key trigger for anxiety. And that's because blood sugar and cortisol, our stress hormone, have a very, very close relationship. So when our blood sugar crashes, the body pumps out cortisol because, one, a blood sugar crash is a stressor on the body. So I'll look back to this in a sec. So blood sugar is a stress on the body. And so the body responds by producing cortisol, our stress hormone. But it also does it because cortisol raises our blood sugar. And the reason that is because as a stress hormones are there to allow us to fight or flight. And when we need to fight or flight, we need energy in the form of glucose to theoretically run. And so we have stress, cortisol goes up, blood sugar goes up. I had become pre-diabetic from stress alone. I'm not anymore, but that's how dramatic the relationship is. So I see a lot of people who skip meals or undereat and are going through blood sugar crashes, and that will trigger anxiety quite dramatically. So by getting a hold of blood sugar, that can really, really help with mental health. It also, imbalanced blood sugar, too high or too low, is just really damaging to the brain. It can put us at risk for other things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and things like that because it inflames the brain. So the key ways to balance blood sugar not skipping meals, but trying to get protein, fat, and fiber at every meal is going to be really, really helpful for stabilizing blood sugar, because proteins and fats don't raise blood sugar. And the three of those help blunt the effects of blood sugar. So if you eat a piece of toast, blood sugar goes up and then comes back down quite quickly, because all it is really is glucose. There's not a lot of fiber or anything else going on. If you take the same piece of toast and you add nut butter to it, or avocado and eggs, that blood sugar will rise less and it will dip less. So we're not having this peaks and valleys, even though in that meal you've eaten the same amount of carbs. The body handles it differently when we pair it with other foods. So it's not that we can't eat carbs, it's that we want to be wise about how we're combining them. And then being mindful not to overdo the sweets, of course, or the refined carbs. So instead of white bread, maybe having, whole grains. Instead of white pasta, having lentil pasta. So things like that, white rice, brown rice. So that's that for blood sugar. Super important also is adding healthy fats for the brain, especially your omegas. Our brains are 60% fat. So this whole low fat craze has been really damaging to the brains. I don't think it is a coincidence that Alzheimer's has become increasingly a problem. I think it was it's up to 2018, there's been a 146% increase in Alzheimer's, and 1 in 3 people in their elderly years have some sort of dementia, including Alzheimer's or something else. So super important to take care of our brains, eat healthy fats, especially omegas. So your cold water, wild caught fatty fish, so sardines and salmon and mackerel. And then having things like nuts and seeds and avocados is really great for the brain too. We also need fats for our cells and our hormones. So no fat phobia here at all. The other things that are really helpful are lowering toxins in the body. So we get toxins through our food, so choosing organic can be really helpful. Thinking about using clean body products. There's an app called Think Dirty where you can kind of look up all of your body products and it'll give you a scale of whether it's toxic or not. If you go to my website, I also have a list of products that I recommend. They're beauty products. There's some that are on a higher price scale and lower price scale. So these are things that I personally use. I have like 2 affiliate links out of like 100 items. It's really just to give people like a resource of good things to put into their body and on their bodies. And the reason we want to do this for mental health is because when we have toxins, it inflames the brain, it causes inflammation throughout the whole body, could cause brain fog, and we just don't want any of that stuff. So it's important for all health, but also brain health. Healing the gut is also super, super, super key for mental health. Almost everybody that has a mental health issue with anxiety, or especially anxiety, will have a gut issue, and the two are super interconnected. So a stressed out mind will cause issues and imbalances in the gut, because stress can sterilize and kill off good bacteria. When we have an unhappy gut, we are more likely to have anxiety and depression because serotonin is primarily made in the gut. So we have to be really mindful to take care of the gut, do any rehab and healing that is needed. I cannot, in like a 60-second thing, be able to even begin to tell you how to heal the gut, but what I've already said will be super, super helpful. So eating whole foods, balancing blood sugar, lowering stress, lowering toxins, that is super key, and hydration. So that's the main things on diet, but even if you eat the perfect diet, the body can be super unwell because the mind is so powerful, which is why I love psilocybin. But really just trying to reduce stressors that are within our control. So a lot of us have a lot of stressors, and I think that we can believe that we can't do anything about them. But if we really look at it, sometimes there's some hard decisions we have to make that will take things off of our plate. So when I was on the brink of burnout, I was in school for nutrition. I was an interior designer, so I was running my interior design firm, and I was working 17 hours a day. I took 10 days off in 10 months. And I felt like I am trapped. There's nothing I can do because I can't fire these clients because they're, bring in all of this money every month, and I can't let go of nutrition because that's what I want to do. And so I didn't let go of anything. But if we don't take something off of our plate, if it's full and we keep adding, we're going to end up dropping the whole damn plate. So we want to take things off where we can. Now, A lot of that, if there isn't things to take off, like you can't let go of a job or a project or whatever it is, there's also asking for help, asking your partner for help, outsourcing things. So I get groceries delivered. I have someone clean my house every 2 weeks. So just things that help. I ask my husband for more help instead of trying to do everything myself, like I tend to do. Also really building boundaries and letting go of toxic people or toxic relationships, and kind of understanding that for me, or as women, I think that we have a hard time saying no to things, and we want to say yes to everything, and we feel like we should say yes to everything. So learning how to say no is super, super important. I've also found that respect increases. People are not upset when you say no. Respect increases. If it doesn't, that person, in my opinion, doesn't need to be in your life. Two is learning that there isn't just yes and no. That's not the only option. I have changed and reframed my mind to yes with boundaries. So I'm saying yes, but there's a limitation to what I will do. And with no, it's unapologetically no for me. So I think it's when we have a tendency to be like, no, I'm so sorry, I can't do that. And I'm just like, no, I'm unable to do that, but I really hope you find someone who can help you. Instead of saying I'm sorry, because I don't need to be sorry, and I don't need to take on that guilt or anxiety about saying no. So really protecting our energy, creating morning routines is also a really beautiful way to protect our energy. And that's all of that is really healing to the brain and the nervous system. So we really want to be giving our body a break. We want to make sure we're not in that fight or flight mode, which most of us are. Something about stress that I think changes a lot of people's perception of it is that we think of stress as being mental and emotional. And we're like, okay, I can feel stress about finances and about work and relationships, but stress is so much broader than that because stress is physical as well. So blood sugar crashes, like I said, is a stressor. Toxins are a stressor. Loud music can be a stressor. And our body also cannot tell the difference between a real stress. So real stress to the body is like a life-threatening stress, facing a bear, and a perceived stress, like a text message or the news or emails. So most of us, we wake up, we turn off our alarms. That immediately pulls you into fight or flight. We're not in that like rest and digest kind of special place. What are you seeing?
A baby jackrabbit. I apologize, but it's the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life.
I saw a rabbit yesterday on my hike.
He came out of nowhere. I was trying so hard to keep it under control, but his ears are like 4 times the size of his body, and I couldn't help it. Sorry.
Baby. So stress is both perceived and real. So we wake up, we get the alarm, we're in stress mode. Then we go on to social media, we go on to the news. You're getting stressors, you're getting comparison syndrome, like the world is a mess, politics is a mess, and we're all super stressed out. Then we're like, oh shit, I've spent way too much time like in bed on my phone, and now I gotta rush and have my morning routine and do all of these things. And so we're just like going from one thing to another, and our stress response is getting triggered over and over and over again. If we're commuting, traffic, that is a stressor. Obviously all day when we're working, we're serving, that's a stressor. Then we get home and we think, oh, hey, I'm gonna chill, but we're doing Netflix, we're drinking wine, and these things are not actually chilling, it's numbing. So what we need to do is give our bodies true breaks, true rest. So that looks different for everybody. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's doing a puzzle, maybe it's art. So it doesn't need to look a certain way. It's however it feels good for you and it feels like relaxing to your soul. So big advocate about self-love, taking time, taking moments to yourself. Last thing is prioritizing sleep. Super important. One of our biggest body stressors is being out of sync with our circadian rhythm, which is our wake and sleep cycle. So when we wake up, our cortisol levels should be nice and high, melatonin should be low, and then throughout the day they switch, cortisol goes down, melatonin goes up so we can sleep. A lot of us are out of sync because we're going to bed too late, waking up later, and also having inconsistency. So if we can try to have a consistent wake up time, regardless of the sleep time, that can be really great. We are going to be sharing with you a blog post that I have about 10 ways to improve sleeping, get really good, deep, restorative sleep. So there's a couple of things that I've talked about super briefly, and these are like the spark notes of spark notes of spark notes, so it's really small. Usually I take like an entire one-on-one session with clients through each of these things. But there's some blog posts that kind of support you guys with those things.
Yeah, perfect. I feel like he's like right in front of me. I like don't want to scare him. So, I was gonna share the blog post in the chat here as we go, and I was gonna let you guys ask any questions you have. Oh, bye, buddy. Thanks. Hope you find your dad. So I'm gonna start dropping the blog post in here. There's some for anxiety and gut health, and then the sleep one that she mentioned. Also the list up at the top that is about other pharmaceutical drugs. That's the first one up there. But I'm gonna start dropping in all these awesome blog posts. Do you guys have any questions at all?
I had a lot of questions at the beginning, but you answered every single one of them. So that was really awesome. You were very thorough, and I learned so much. I took a lot of notes.
Thank you so much for being here, and I'm glad that I was able to answer those questions.
Yay. Oh, perfect. Alrighty. Well, wow, look at how on time we are. Go up. Cool. Well, thank you ladies so much for being here. Those that are here and those that are watching too. I hope you're feeling well wherever you are. Savannah, thank you so much for doing this. You told me the other day this is like the first collaborative thing you've done in like so long, and I just feel so honored and so excited.
Yeah, I usually do one-on-ones, but it's always fun. I've only done one other collaborative thing. So this was really a treat, and I'm so appreciative of all of you for being here and for you for asking me.
Of course, my pleasure. And yeah, all those blog links are in there. Go check out her website. She also always posts really fabulous recipes. And if you want to just see like the most beautiful food you've ever seen in your entire life, then go follow her on Instagram too. She's makes wonderfully delicious and healing things always on there. So thank you ladies again so much. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Sleep well for those of you. I know it's getting late, so I will let you all go. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.